down at Maritoto, which is near Thames. Handle the button a little earlier, maybe a minute or so early. So we'll just take a minute to say hello to whoever's there. Yeah. What do we got? Yeah, we're continuing with our Bhagavad Gita. Are we on time now? No, we're still a minute or so, but it's all good. Yes, wherever Krishna is present, there is always victory and so many full qualities. And that might be one of the main things we'll talk about this morning. Yes, it's 9 o'clock now, so we can begin. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from Bhagavad Gita as it is, by grace I see Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, and we're in the first chapter. We're going to pick it up at text number 12. Krishnendu Prabhu indicated that he had covered text number 11 yesterday, and we'll see how far we'll go. We'll either do 12 or we might go one or two more. Let's see how it pans out. So text number 12. Oh, and remember, if you do have something, always attempt to put it in the chat box, and I can attempt to see if we can if we can see it. I'm just seeing it still says Krishnendu, but obviously I'm not. That's just the way it is showing at the moment. We are simultaneously one and different. We are one as humans. We are one as aspiring devotees. We are one in so many ways, but we are different, and I'm sure Krishnendu is happy about that, as we all are. But the amazing thing, actually, we'll just mention it now since it comes to mind. The amazing thing is that although we have our individuality, we tend to overemphasize that. I remember hearing a lecture many, many years ago, maybe 30 odd years ago, and the devotee was speaking, emphasizing that point that we have our independence, and that's so important. It's such a major philosophical point that we have our independence, or we have our individuality, but we have the problem of overemphasizing that because our individuality is only functioning properly when we realize that we are one but different, that our purpose is to serve the complete whole Krishna. And I was reading the other day just that example of a hand is trying to feed the other hand, and he's not using the via medium of the stomach, then there's no question that one hand can feed the other hand. So I thought, that's quite, yeah, I can understand, I can get that. Yeah. So when we're thinking separately, and Srila Prabhupada gave that other example of the rasgulla and the hand. So if the hand thinks, yes, let me now eat this sweetmeat and enjoy it, because after all, it's in my hand. What's the problem? Why can't I just do that? But the via medium for the enjoyment is the central stomach, which nourishes all the parts of the body. In a similar way, we are determinedly focused on independently trying to enjoy this world, when the message to be understood is that only by rendering or giving pleasure to the reservoir of all pleasure, then all the parts and parcels will be nourished, just as the hand is nourished when the stomach is fed. So we've heard this a million times, but as I've said many times also, sometimes the penny drops, or we get it. We think, yeah, that's the problem. And I was listening to Vaisheshika Prabhu yesterday, again, just establishing the point that everything we have at our disposal, it doesn't belong to us. It's been gifted to us. It's been lent to us. It's being provided by a higher energy, a higher personality, ultimately. The energy is there, and then there's the energetic source. So unimaginable as it is, there is a divine power which is supplying into. I'm speaking just now. Yeah, the thoughts are coming, the intelligence to speak in a certain way about a certain subject, to choose your very next. Where is that coming from? We don't know. The light comes every day. The food is coming. The colors are manifest. The different species of life are there, and it's all happening before us. And foolishly, we are thinking we can manipulate this to our ultimate advantage and be the supreme predominator. That's quite an amazing thing. And billions and trillions and multi-trillions of living entities are trying to do that separately in the material sphere. So Bhagavad Gita is discussing all about that. The jiva, his existential position in the material world, and who is that supreme facilitator for all the living entities, and that is being introduced as Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Bhagavad Gita is here in the first chapter observing the armies, and it's setting the scene, and there's so much to learn from this first chapter. I do remember, maybe like many of you, that the first chapter seems to be quite difficult. I remember first somebody said, you've got to read the Bhagavad Gita, and going into the first chapter, I'm thinking, I can't even pronounce any of these names. There's a Duryodhana, and there's a Dhritarashtra, and then there's this one and that one, and they're all assembled, they're all going to fight. And I'm thinking, gee, I can't quite get this. It's quite hard. So it's setting the scene, and it's only in chapter 2 that we will get the instructions of Krishna coming through to dispel the ignorance. But as we go back to the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, and we've been reading Srila Prabhupada's introduction, we begin to understand that just as in the Bhagavad Gita there are extenuating circumstances that each person finds themselves in a similar way, every one of us is conditioned by extenuating circumstances. It's called our material conditioning, and we are absorbed in trying to make adjustments to overcome the difficulties of that extenuating circumstance that we're in. Now, there's different relationships that we're in. We've got different bodily constitutions. We've got a mental mindset on things. Our intelligence is good or not so good. Look at everything. We're born in a certain place, and all the circumstances are there. We're either beautiful or ugly or somewhere in between. We have wealth to some degree or not very much. We have power. We have a strong body. We have a weak body. We have a sick body. And we're compelled to act according to those circumstances. And this is the whole message of Bhagavad Gita, is to go beyond our limited existential situation and try to understand that this spot life that we're living now, no matter how extenuating the circumstances, is inconsequential to our identity as the eternal spiritual being, part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we constantly are challenged to push back that consideration, or all of the different considerations that fill our consciousness, fill our thoughts, and compel us to act in different ways in this world, unknowing that those actions will compound, and we will develop more karma, and this whole cycle will go on. So going into today's verse, text number 12, chapter 1. Tasya sanjanayan harsham kuro vridha pitamaha shimhanadam vinadyochai shankham dadmo patapavan. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. Then Bhishma, the great valiant grandsire of the Kurd dynasty, the grandfather of the fighters, blew his conch shell very loudly, making a sound like the roar of a lion, giving Duryodhana joy. Srila Prabhupada's purport. The grandsire of the Kurd dynasty could understand the inner meaning of the heart of his grandson Duryodhana. And out of his natural compassion for him, he tried to cheer him by blowing his conch shell very loudly, befitting his position as a lion. Indirectly, by the symbolism of the conch shell, he informed his depressed grandson Duryodhana that he had no chance of victory in the battle, because the Supreme Lord Krishna was on the other side. So this is Prabhupada's important point he's made. Indirectly, by the symbolism of the conch shell. So this is a very subtle nuance or understanding of this. He says he informed his depressed grandson Duryodhana, he was always unhappy, Duryodhana, that he had no chance of victory in the battle. Why? Because the Supreme Lord Krishna was on the other side. But still, it was his duty to conduct the fight, and no pains would be spared in that connection. Om Ganatimarandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Grave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance. My spiritual master is forcing me to open my eyes with the torchlight of transcendental knowledge. Offer my humble obeisances unto his lotus feet. Then Bhishma, the great valiant grandsire of the Kurd dynasty, the grandfather of the fighters, blew his conch shell very loudly, making a sound like the roar of a lion, giving Duryodhana joy. It was his duty, the last sentence in the paragraph of the purport, but still it was his duty to conduct the fight, and no pains would be spared in that connection. So I've already mentioned this position that we may find ourselves in. It's quite hard sometimes to understand Bhishma's position. He's the grandsire of the Kurd dynasty, but somehow or other, by the will of providence, let us say, he found himself in a compromised position. And that began to show up when Draupadi was being insulted in the assembly of all the generals in the assembly hall. And both, it's mentioned earlier that Dronacharya, and who was expected to be to object to such a unbelievably shocking event happening in the assembly hall, and Bhishma as the great grandsire, and who was known to be very kindly disposed to the Pandavas, just as Dronacharya was also. They were so well disposed towards the Pandavas, but he didn't make a word. So somehow or other, the compromise was there. It said that he was dependent somehow or other, that Duryodhana was doing the job. He was there as the acting as the king, and he was doing okay. It's not that he was not managing things properly. He was managing, but his real nature showed up when Dushasan was given the encouragement to insult Draupadi under Duryodhana's direction. So these were his true colors. He was administrating okay, making sure this was happening and that was happening and that was happening, but his demoniac side was very, very fully manifest, to the point where we have even seen that when Krishna came to negotiate for a peaceful settlement somehow or other. This is foolish. So Krishna took it upon himself. And Duryodhana said that he was not interested, and to the point, as I mentioned, I think last week, that he attempted to capture Krishna, which again is a demoniac thing. The messenger, the person who comes to negotiate for peace, should never be challenged in that way and be tried to be according to Kshatriya principles. He should not be apprehended or tried to be captured. It was a stupid thing for Duryodhana to do. And Krishna wasn't very impressed, and he manifested a universal form, partial universal form. And again, Duryodhana is like, it's some kind of magic. This Krishna has got some magic of some kind, mystic power. Yes, he has. He's the master of all mystics. He possesses all mystic potency. So Krishna retired from that attempt, and the whole battle of Kurukshetra was all set to go. And somehow or other, Bhishma was on the side of the Kurus, as he was the grandsire of the Kurus, and he was the grandsire for all the Kurus, including the quote-unquote Pandavas, who were actually Kurus. But it was mentioned earlier also that Dhritarashtra specifically mentioned, what did my sons do, the Kauravas, and the sons of Pandu, the Pandavas. He separated these Kurus and gave them the category of the Pandavas. So this was again revealing the intention of the evil-minded Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra to usurp the kingdom. It's also interesting that his conch shell was like that of a lion, making a sound like the roar of a lion. So he was the lion amongst men. We can't help but think as the Shringa Chaturdasi comes up soon next week, I think it is, yes, and that Lord Krishna is also appears a half man and half lion, and what a form that is. The sound vibration of Lord Nrsimha Dev. So Bhishma was roaring like a lion, and it was giving Duryodhana joy. So this is another interesting point, how this sense of happiness and distress, matra sparshasta kunteya sitoshna sukadukada agama payano nityastam statiksha sasva bharata. The non-permanent of happiness, the non-permanent appearance and disappearance of happiness and distress, and the disappearance in due course, are like the appearance and disappearance of the winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception. So this is the point. We hear something. So Duryodhana was hearing through his senses. The senses perceived this tumultuous sound of like a lion roaring in the battlefield, this conch shell. So he became joyful. So this is natural through his senses. But then he'll hear something else and he'll be unhappy. And then he'll see something that pleases. In this way, we perceive things through the senses, and they bring us happiness and distress. And Tams Tatiksha Sasva Bharata, Krishna is explaining that one should tolerate those non-permanent appearances of happiness and distress, knowing well that as this happiness has come, and it will be followed by distress. And that sounds very fatalistic, but at the same time, we continue. This distress is not permanent. It will go. It has come by its own accord, and it will go by its own accord. That's the higher nature that is pushing the living entity throughout his life in the material world. So one is advised in the beginning of spiritual life, that's Krishna in the second chapter, he explains it like that we have to learn to tolerate this and not focus ourselves. The person who Apuryamanamachala Pratishtam Samudramapa Pravashanti Yadvat Tadvat Kamayam Pravashanti Sharvesha Shantavapnotina Kama Kamai. Person who's not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled but always remains still, can alone achieve peace, and not the person who tries to satisfy those desires. So this is a linked verse to that other verse of Matrasparsha's Takuntia. It's linked there. So we find this is the way the material world works. Something pleases us, something displeases, and we try to adjust it. And we think that will bring us the shanti, the peace, the satisfaction that we desire. But it's not at all the case. And Krishna very clearly points this out right at the beginning, that we should learn not to be too affected by the happiness and distress. The desires to be fulfilled, we should keep them minimal, because they will simply complicate our life more and more in our struggle to overcome the difficulties that we face. We generally don't struggle to overcome the happiness. We don't struggle for that. Oh, this happiness, I'd want to get rid of it. But Mahavishnu Maharaj has a very lovely point that he made. He said that happiness should be digested drop by drop. It's such a nice point. Why? Because it's an intoxicant. Just like sugar is a type of intoxicant. And you see, that's why the ants, they like the sugar and they become totally intoxicated. And you see bees eating the nectar and the pollen and so on and so forth, and they become intoxicated. They can hardly move. So this happiness is to be experienced, but we should experience it drop by drop so that we don't become intoxicated. Why? Because we will find great disappointment, frustration, and anger. So all these verses, they all connect. That anger after frustration. By contemplating the objects of the senses, a person becomes attached. From such attachment, lust develops. From lust, anger arises. When our desire to overcome difficulties and enjoy becomes frustrated, then we become angry. And from anger, delusion. We become deluded. And from delusion, bewilderment of memory is lost, and we fall into the material pool. That pool, passion, ignorance, generally. Not so much goodness, but occasionally. So we fall into this lower position. And Krishna is advising that we stay in the higher position of self-realization. And then that we will see what to do. So knowing what to do is we're hearing about. It was Bhishma's duty to conduct the fight. That was his duty according to his situation that he was in. And he had concluded that, yes, due to my compromised position, I will have to fight on behalf of the Kurd dynasty, which I am the grandsire of, and everyone is expecting me to remain there and not to cut out and be with a small side party of the Pandavas. So he had to conduct the fight. But Duryodhana was concerned that Bhishma be protected on all sides, we heard. Give in the last verse, all of you must now give full support to grandfather Bhishma. So this is what's going on. This is the real world. From Duryodhana's point of view, hey, nice philosophy. You're all talking about this and that. But hey, in the real world, I've got a kingdom and I ain't giving it up. And I have got a big army. And I'm pretty confident that Bhishma Dev, if the other generals do their jobs properly, we can overcome. The Pandavas don't have the military strength. They don't have the generals. Bhima is just a fig in comparison to Bhishma Dev. He's not smart enough. He's lots of strength, but not the smartness, not the experience. So in the quote unquote, again, in the real world, we've got Duryodhana. He's thinking, I think I can pull this off. In fact, I don't think we really have a problem. We've managed to manipulate things. It's time to go. And all we have to do is perform our duty. And he's emphasizing to Bhishma, this is your duty. And we're going to support you to perform your duty because after all, you're the grandsire of this great Kurd, and etc., etc. So he's fully absorbed in that. And why? Because he's thinking, if I have this kingdom, so many persons have been my enemies, I have destroyed them. This is called the demonic mentality. and by my schemes I will accumulate more and more and more, and this way I'll be perfect, happy. I will give in charity and I will rejoice. In this way I will be the king of the world. Harry Ball. That's not the idea. You wouldn't be saying Harry. This is the way it goes. So we become intoxicated by this, and we see such a calamity. The Battle of Kurukshetra, millions and millions of persons killed, millions and millions of family traditions destroyed. Unwanted progeny will be one of the outcomes, as Arjuna will go on to explain. Um, that's why he's not so keen. So again, then we can go to Arjuna and find his position. Arjuna, he's knowing that he should fight for his brother. Yudhisthira should be he is the rightful heir to the throne, and therefore I should perform this duty and fight on his behalf. Um, uh, so he has this extenuating circumstances, but it becomes so bewildering to him, he's ready to not be on the battlefield. And we'll hear more about that. So we can just see how that we're pushed in so many ways to act. I'm just thinking whether I should continue here or go on to the next verse. We'll have to go on to the next two verses. Let's go on. We'll just, where are we? What time? We've got a little bit. I think we've only gone about 26 minutes. Yes, so let's go on to, we'll go on to the next verses because they are absolutely connected. Yeah, so many aspects of it. All right, we've got the Kurd dynasty, we've got the Pandavas as a subsection of that Kurd dynasty, we've got Duryodhana being cheered up by the grandsire. You get that family connection. That's another one of the compromises, because actually, after all, Duryodhana is his grandson, so there's that family connection too. Natural compassion, try to cheer him up, befitting his position as a lion. So he's got that. I'm a lion. I'm the general. I've got to do what I have to do here. And whether it means killing family members, the Kshatriyas were so, what would you say, so powerful that they could overcome mental and sensual distractions and remain focused in what they had to achieve once they made their decision. His grandson Duryodhana was depressed, and so yeah, it was still his duty to conduct the fight, and no pains would be spared in that connection. Okay, it's number 13. Tataha sanghascha be panavanaka gomukaha sashaiva vyahanda sa sabdas tumalo bhavat. Translation: after that, the conch shells, drums, bugles, trumpets, and horns were all suddenly sounded, and the combined sound was tumultuous. It's very beautiful too, isn't it? When you again, just the difference between modern life and times of ancient is so great. And it appears the other way. It's amazing. Yeah, it appears we're so more advanced now and so more sophisticated, but actually it's exactly the opposite. Because here we find the importance that out there in the battlefield, there's blowing of conches, there's drummers, there's bugles, trumpets, and horns. They're all sounded, and the combined sound was tumultuous. So it was a very subtle thing. All these things had their place. Those persons would not engage in the fight, as far as I understand. Please correct me if I'm wrong there. It wasn't that everyone would just be totally slaughtered while they were playing their trumpets, but they had their time to render their service, and it was a glory. There was a mood of glory, and although it was illusory energy, but it was very exalted in comparison to your, what do they call those things? there's some jets they disappear or something. Forget what they're called. Yeah, there's a name for them. Um, and they just appear. You can't stealth jets or something. You can't even catch the radar. You can hardly see them, and all of a sudden, everyone's blown to pieces. Men, women, and children. This and that, and the next thing. Oh, but we're only aiming at military targets. Yeah, but we missed. We're sorry, or we actually did mean to get that one, but we're saying we're only aiming at military targets. Um, so yeah, there's no glory to the whole thing, but here we're hearing glory. So pushing on to text 14, there's no purport to 13, so I'll conclude with 14. We'll do 14. Text number 14. Tataha shweter hayer yukte mahati syandanestito madhava pandavaschaiva divyo shankho pradhadmatu. Translation and purport. On the other side, both Lord Krishna and Arjuna, stationed on a great chariot drawn by white horses, sounded their transcendental conch shells. So now we're switching to the other side. Both Lord Krishna and Arjuna stationed on a great chariot drawn by white horses. So we get a picture. Dhritarashtra's getting the picture from Sanjaya. You can see how you can see, isn't it? By hearing, we can see. That's a very important point, isn't it? Because we want to see God, but first we're told you have to hear, and we can learn so much and see so much by hearing. So we haven't seen these conch shells being sounded. We haven't seen the drums and the persons carrying them and beating them, the bugles. We haven't seen them, the trumpets and the horns, but we can see them by hearing about them. And all, yeah. And now we're seeing another picture. We've moved from that picture to the other side, where Lord Krishna and Arjuna stationed on a great chariot. So it's a substantial, great chariot, powerful chariot, Arjuna's chariot, and it's drawn by white horses. So we have a picture of 4 beautiful white horses. They, Lord Krishna and Arjuna, sounded their transcendental conch shells. Srila Prabhupada's purport. In contrast with the conch shell blown by Bhishma Dev, the conch shells in the hands of Krishna and Arjuna are described as transcendental. You see, transcendental, divyo or divyam, but it's divyo means transcendental. The sound of the transcendental conch shells indicated that there was no hope of victory for the other side, because Krishna was on the side of the Pandavas. Jayastu Pandu Putranam Yesam Pakshe Janardhana. Victory is always with persons like the sons of Pandu, because Lord Krishna is associated with them. And whenever and wherever the Lord is present, the goddess of fortune is also there, because the goddess of fortune never lives alone without her husband. Therefore, victory and fortune were awaiting Arjuna, as indicated by the transcendental sound produced by the conch shell of Vishnu or Lord Krishna. Besides that, the chariot on which both the friends were seated had been donated by Agni, the fire god, to Arjuna, and this indicated that this chariot was capable of conquering all sides, wherever it was drawn over the 3 worlds. So again, we get this very beautiful Srila Prabhupada's purport, and the whole scene, it is very a transcendental scene. It's very glorious, it's very beautiful, it's very powerful, it's full of valor and high qualities. And we've seen that Bhishma was trying to represent the high power of the there's the power going back of the modern time, it's a three-wheeler motorbike, and the man's on it, and he's thinking, "Wow, I'm perfect, powerful, and happy," zooming around. But it's just starting to rain here, so he's he's actually going to get wet. It doesn't. It doesn't take much. It just takes a moment actually to go through and see behind whatever is manifest its actual nature um, instead of its manifestation in the illusory energy. When you see it like that, it's so powerful. That this person just went past. He's got this big three-wheeler bike and stuff, and it's all new and fancy. It's looking good, but it's starting to rain, so you guys going to get soaked. So it's not that much fun. So yeah, it's not that powerful. But he's thinking, "Oh, this is it. I'm the man." And then somebody else drives past, and they're on their way to work. You think, "Oh yeah, well they're doing pretty well." But if you go inside and figure out what's going on, all the anxieties, all the troubles, it doesn't stop. So um, going back into this, we can see these different situations which are being explained, and I was just trying to focus on how amazingly how rich the culture was. So there was a way everything should be done, and it had its methodology. Sorry, I'm just trying to get focused on this again. Yeah, the chariot was mentioned. So we've heard that the conch shells were transcendental. They were not ordinary conch shells, not blown by ordinary persons. They were blown by Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and his eternal associate Arjuna. So Prabhupada says there was no hope for victory. Ultimately, why? Because Krishna was there. Um, and it may be worthwhile going there now because all the all other considerations are limited and they are temporary, and the main consideration is Krishna. And when Krishna is present, then everything is in its proper perspective. And when Krishna is not present, then it's in some what's the right word? It's lacking. There's something missing, either massively or in a small way. Whether it's 1% missing or 99% missing, it's not complete. I was learning. There we go. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. I was learning that verse again, trying to pick it up again at the Sri Upanishad. The Supreme Personality is perfect and complete, and because he's completely perfect, everything emanates from him is completely equipped in itself as a complete whole. And even though so many complete manifestations emanate from him, he remains the complete balance. So this is the Krishna factor, and everything else is just all kinds of attempts to manifest and enjoy that position of Krishna, the Supreme Person, who's complete. So here we've got the Lord. He's seated beside Arjuna. He's situated, it says. It doesn't say the play. I'm trying to get the right word because we get pictures of Arjuna sitting or standing, and Krishna beside the chariot in which both of them were seated. Okay, it's good. It does say seated. Has been donated by Agni, the fire god. So they're different gods. And Krishna, remember, Krishna's appearing in this way. It appears like a human being, and people see him in that way. Certain people and others see him as the Supreme Lord. Queen Kunti is saying that you are Jagat Guru, you are the original personality of Godhead. Arjuna accepts, as we read through Bhagavad Gita, that yes, you are Param Dhamma Pavitram Paramam Pavam Purusham Shashvatam Devi. Everyone has declared this of you. It's the great sages such as Asita, Devala, and Vyas. Now you are proclaiming it unto me. So I accept everything. So this is Krishna's transcendental position. And but he appears. He says, "Those who are foolish deride me when I appear in this human-like form." It's not a human form at all. It's a divine form, and he appears and appears to act. And even we hear Lord Brahma is bewildered. The Supreme Lord, even the great demigods and saints and rishis are placed into illusion. That's in the first verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Even Brahma himself is placed into the illusion. He can't get it. He says, "How is this little boy my Supreme Lord?" Usually I'm approaching, and Shwetadweep we're approaching on behalf of all the demigods, the great Purusha avatar of Garbhodakshai Vishnu and like that, Chirdakshai Vishnu, and that's the way he's generally appreciating or associating to some degree with the Lord. But when the Lord appears as a little cowherd boy, Lord Brahma decides to take away the calves and the cows and so on. That's another Leela. So, so when he appears, we get these things. He's with Arjuna, and Arjuna has been given this chariot by the fire god Agni. So again, it's very special and has the ability to be drawn throughout the three worlds, and it's capable of conquering on all sides. So a wonderful description of what life was like in those days, and it's for those of martial spirit. This is definitely the way to go. Bugles, trumpets, drums, conch shells, horns, they would be all sounded and they would fight. And those who were killed on battlefield, like real Kshatriyas, they would be, I was reading that yesterday, I think their destination would be the sun planet, just by being killed on that battlefield. And they had complete conviction because that was their nature, and they were guided by this Vedic culture. And people would say, "Oh, how foolish is this?" And again, this is how Maya is working. So all these foolish ideas that they would go and fight, and then they would go to higher planets, and then they would just give up their lives on the battlefield. Oh gosh, that's so stupid. That's superstitious concept or idea. And there's a certain element to that you can easily accept. You think, well, yeah, well, that's what you're saying. It takes a lot of faith, and faith, who knows? And that way we're all full of doubt, constantly doubting everything and everyone apart from our own stupidity. We're really confident about our own stupidity. So that's what we have to do all the time. When we hear these explanations, then we have to think, well, if you don't accept these explanations, then what is the other explanation? And then you're lost, because you say, yeah. So there's no need for such qualities. So what you do is you just become a gross sense enjoyer. You go to the supermarkets. You listen to the media. You are controlled by all of that. You live a life of perverted sense gratification more and more as we go on in the whole thing. And then you die, and there's nothing to it. There's nothing beyond that. How depressing. No wonder people, mental illness is the greatest disease. It's said it will increase more and more and more because there's no good qualities in this modern age. There's no virtue, there's no purity, there's no cleanliness, there's all of these things, and they were all enmeshed in this Vedic culture. And we're hearing about the Kshatriyas and how they would act, why they would act, and what the results would be. So I am going to conclude there. I think, yes, that's plenty time. My humble obeisances to devotees that have tuned in now, and to devotees that may tune in later. Again, I'll just mention I'm not Krishnendu, just for a laugh. I think Krishnendu's a little bit younger than me, and he's a bit prettier than me, more handsome like. And I think Krishna was yesterday, but it didn't change when I changed it. I changed it to Jaya Sila, and it somehow didn't happen. But you know what? That's all okay. Okay, so we'll end at that point, and we will say all glories to Srila Prabhupada and all glories to the devotees. Please continue um, reading Bhagavad Gita constantly. If you don't read Bhagavad Gita, go on to Srimad Bhagavatam. If it's not Bhagavatam, go on to Chaitanya Charitamrita. If it's not that, learn some slokas. If it's not that, engage fully in service. And this is the process that Krishna gives us. He says, you should always think of me, become my devotee, etc., etc. So always think of me, Krishna says, not just sometimes think of me. He says, all that you do, all that you eat, all that you offer and give away, all austerities that you perform, should be done as an offering unto me. So do everything for me. Think of me always. Always chanting my Satatam Kirtayant, always chanting my glories, endeavoring with great determination, bowing before me. These great souls perpetually worship me. Perpetually. That means all the time. Perpetual means constantly, all the time. So that's what we got. And it's so wonderful because the other stuff which grabs us, I'll get off this class and you'll think he's finished now, so it's time for me to go. And you'll get back into the stuff of the world. And guess what? You're going to feel adiboltic, adidaivic, adiatmic kleshas, miseries from your body and your mind, miseries from other living entities, misery from the weather. It's too hot, it's too cold, it's too this, too sunny, it doesn't stop. So Krishna is saying there is another energy. It's the internal energy. And those great souls who are yogis in devotion never return to this temporary world, which is filled with various miseries. Why? Because they've come to that supreme abode. So that is our desire. That is our param gatim, the supreme abode. Not to come back again and again in the repeated cycle of birth and death. So please keep the Hare Krishna mantra on our lips. And if you, like me, often not able to connect, then try again and again and again, and just keep trying, and you will connect. And Krishna will give you the taste. Krishna will give you, in due course of time, it will be there, and it is there. And just as you kind of think you're just about there, it will kind of maybe disappear a little bit, and then Krishna will encourage you to continue, to continue. So let's do that and keep our focus, and we will daily move towards the supreme destination. Okay, finished. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories Ananta Kota Vaishnava Brinda Ki Jai. Hare Krishna.